This was my highest rated book of the year so far, so stay tuned for this one because I'm going to break down why I thought Design of Darkness by R.D. Pyers was an absolute banger. Now let's just give a little bit of context before we dive into this review. There are three main kingdoms that we're following in this world. Over in the east, those people are suffering under the rule of a tyrannical king, and any resistance to his rule is met with just devastating cruelty. Over to the west, we have a very stable empire with Asian themes, and those people just lost their longtime and beloved ruler. And so the baton has basically been passed down to a kid at this point. And then there's an island nation in between, closer to the west, but they have their own kingdom and culture and customs. But I would say that in this book, the nations are a little bit detached from one another, but these people from the east are just desperate for any kind of help and support because they can't fight against this tyrannical king alone. All of their rebellious efforts have basically failed. So they, as a last resort, decide to find allies in these other kingdoms and nations. Meanwhile, in this empire in the west, the new ruler has to navigate how to be a great leader after the previous empress left behind such like peace and prosperity. So those are big shoes to fill for this new guy. This book is just filled with mystery and drama and action and depth. It really felt like the foundation of something truly phenomenal. Like if this book was basically the setup for the rest of the series, I just can't even wait to read more. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's just officially kick off this indie review. Now, the immersion, the world building in Design of Darkness easily gets a 10 out of 10 from me because it just has a great combination of scope and detail. The scenes were just so different and he explored so many different settings that every page just felt like a new experience that kept me wanting to learn more. You get to travel to monasteries, a merchant ship, small villages, cities, different architectures and styles, rebellion outposts, palaces, dungeons. There are just so many different places being explored, and I love that in fantasy books. I feel like a lot of time we get a lot of like army bases and king's palaces, maybe a little bit of traveling, but we don't get to experience a lot of these different environments in this level of depth, which I think the author did a fantastic job doing. He basically made each place that we visited feel so real without over-explaining anything. He just drops us in and it does feel like a very well-established world, no matter where we're going in the story. In addition to these physical attributes, you also get a lot of cultural exploration. So we get to see burial practices from different nations. We get to see different traditions of rulers and how that selection process works. We get to see festivals and social norms for different cultures, how people dress in different countries. It's just so, there's so much depth packed into this book without it feeling like a burden to the reader. It just is so natural. And then you also get a variety of climates. You get tropical climates over to the west, and in the island regions, you get more mountainous landscapes, and of course you have the open ocean as people are traveling. So yeah, I was absolutely immersed in this world. I felt like I was a part of this experience from start to finish, and nothing throughout the book ever pulled me out of the story. Moving on to the names, which I gave a 9.5 out of 10. This was really close to a 10. I had a few issues with some of the dialogue between different characters that I feel like were more plot driven rather than character driven. And it's such a character driven story that in the few moments that they happened, they were noticeable because it just didn't feel as natural as the rest of the story that was taking place, which I would say is a compliment because the rest of it was so smooth with their personalities, with their conversations, that when I did see those few plot-driven conversations, I just noticed it more. Whereas if that's more prevalent in a story, I'm less likely to point it out because it's just kind of thrown in with the rest of the story. So still really a positive here. But that's what knocked it down from a full 10. It was really close. Now, this is a multiple POV book, so the personalities of these characters are just so distinct from one another. They feel so real and unique. And each POV had its own tone. It was so believable, so compelling, And I just, again, felt like the dialogue matched their personalities and how they spoke so well. And I think that helped with the world building, just kind of complementing that other category. And the thing is that the side characters were just as deep. A lot of times they get forgotten or just are given kind of tropey characteristics. I felt like the side characters had as much depth as the main POVs that we were reading. So even without their own POVs, these characters felt so rich and interesting. Taigen was great. I loved the two advisors to Kaori, the reserved lady and the more skeptical man. It was just a great dynamic. I loved the captain of his ship and his whole crew, all the personalities there. And honestly, I think that King Fogosombre's wife was a surprise favorite POV of mine. I really liked seeing insights into her psyche and perspective from kind of the villain's realm without us specifically focusing on the villain. It was just an interesting dynamic to read about, so I really liked that. And I didn't expect to like reading her chapters so much, but I did. So yeah, the dialogue was good for the most part. I really the character that I felt maybe deviated the most from their personality was maybe Arsenio. In a couple of his was the most, I would say, plot driven. Sometimes Mariana, but not as much. But I could see an argument that some of those more pushy conversations are part of their personality and desperation, but for now, I have minor issues with that. And by the way, can I just say that I agree with Kaori's advisors when it comes to the war? Like, I get that there's this empathetic sympathy story coming to the king, but from a practical perspective, it makes no sense to go to war. And so I fully agreed. Even though I'm rooting for these people, I fully agreed logically with the advisors. I could go on a spoiler rant about that, about how we're not going to get into that. Overall, just so much depth that I absolutely just got lost in this story. Brutal and realistic interactions. If you like character-driven narratives, I'd say that Design of Darkness is a must-read. Now let's chat about the magic. I don't know what it is about the fact that my favorite books that I've read so far this year are also the ones that have so little magic introduced into the story. And I love magic, so that's weird to me. I should like the books less because there's not as much of a fantastical magical element to it. But with that said, I gave the magic a 6.5 out of 10. And that's mostly because there just was not that much of it. There wasn't a lot of magic. There wasn't a lot of like unique creatures other than like that one water serpent thing. But even then, that's like one creature out of the whole world. So I didn't love that there wasn't a lot of just unique creatures or species or races. That was my only qualm with that particular category. Now, there's not to say that there isn't magic in the book. There is some, but it's very minor. And it's very much an introduction to the magic rather than an established ecosystem that's embedded into the world building. So you have like this soul capturing magic that's kind of cultish, very secretive, where you can kind of see into the past through other people's souls and gain the truth of certain situations. Oh, that's another character I loved. I actually really liked the monastery lady. I can't even remember her name. I really liked her. But anyway, that was interesting to see that magic, but we don't get a lot of it. And then there's also other hints to magical things within the world, like there's body preservation after someone dies from like these magical trees that just keeps people looking fresh. So like there are little things like that that hint at other magical elements, but it's just it takes such a backseat to the rest of the story. And Kings of Paradise was the same way. So I guess if you have good enough world building and good enough characters, I can forgive the lack of magic in my overall score. But that's why this category was a little bit lower than the rest. Moving on to infrastructure, which I gave a 9.5 out of 10. I love it when indie authors find a unique way to structure their books. And Artie Pyers did something really unique with how he structured his story. Like this book right here only had 8 chapters. You'll see that he has listed out here within the chapters is each POVs within that chapter. So it was cool to get the story in like chunks. I've never really seen that done with chapters or have it structured that way. So really cool to see something different there. I also have to shout out the prose of this story. It was so good. It was incredibly well written. And listen, I'm a person who loves boring prose. I love Brandon Sanderson style prose that's really accessible, really straightforward, not a lot of fluff. But this prose of this author was so elegant while still being accessible. His descriptions just evoked so much emotion that just correlated so well with the characters' personalities. Really a masterclass on finding a unique voice in your writing. The pacing was also great. You get a good blend of action as well as time to really get to know the characters through all this political conflict. I would say that the structure maybe is a little bit more of a slower burn, but I don't like saying that because it felt fast-paced even in times where the actual story was a little bit slower, because you're getting to know so much new information about the characters and the cultures and the world building. So it never felt slow to me, but I can tell that this is building to a bigger conflict, a bigger climax in the future installments. And then you also get a little bit of a twist with one of the characters that I did not see coming at all. So it's nice to have a little bit of a surprise with some of the characters that just were really interesting. I don't want to say who for the sake of spoilers, but it really was fun to get that reveal towards the end of the book. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. Suffice it to say, my enjoyment of this story was an easy 10 out of 10. Even though this was a slow burn epic fantasy, in the sense that there weren't like any big wars or magical discoveries that like blew my mind, I still just devoured this book and it just left me wanting more. It is such a good setup for the rest of this series. And the fact that this scored so high as a book one is just insane, because I can only imagine it getting better from here as we explore magic more in depth and have more escalation between these nations. It was just one of my favorite reads so far of the year. So that leaves Design of Darkness with an overall score of 9.1 out of 10. So that means this is going to be the second cover-facing book on my shelf. But before we get it up there, let's talk about the cover. It's okay. But my thing is if you're gonna write a book that the content is a 9 out of 10, you need to have a cover that proves that. And this is actually something that kind of pisses me off. Because look at these two books. Both of these are my 9 out of 10 books. And both of them, the covers, I feel like are lacking so much. They have so much to them. And this is the covers that you're giving us? Come on! Again, they're not bad, but they should be 9 out of 10 covers or 10 out of 10 covers, because your story is worth a 9 out of 10. So that's my little rant. Drives me crazy. To be fair, I love the color purple. Purple is one of my favorite colors. So I like the color scheme of it being purple. There's not a lot of fantasy books that have a purple cover, so I think it stands out in that sense. But I just feel like it's missing something. I know it's a complicated book, so it's kind of hard to nail down what to feature on the cover. You know, maybe the mysterious medallion with the village burning in the background. Maybe King Fogosombre holding his new dark discovery in the shadows. I don't know. I wish I was better at art direction so that I could better articulate what I feel like is missing. I also feel like the typography does not blend with the cover. Like, it feels like it's just on top of it. It doesn't feel part of the artwork, and I like it when the typography is a part of the art. And I'm also being harsher on this cover than I would other covers, because again, I would like it to communicate that 9 out of 10 status. So it's okay, it's not bad, it just, to me, doesn't feel like it's communicating how good this book really was. And even what it's depicting, I don't feel like is how it was described in the story. Like, in the story, I feel like it was described as a wisp of smoke, like maybe like a bright thing of smoke, but not like a bright shining light. So even the scene itself, I don't feel like is depicted well. And you don't see any of the water like on the shoreline. I don't know, I feel like it's missing something. It needs something else. It needs a wow factor. So with that said, let's get this bad boy on the shelf. I also might do a little bit of reorganizing because you can't really see my top shelf when I'm doing the videos, and that's where Kings of Paradise has been chilling, and I feel like it should be featured more since it's a cover-facing book, so I'm probably gonna bump it down to this other shelf. Nice, I like that. That looks good to me. Well, I mean, the cover needs work, but its position looks good. The Kings of Paradise over here. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. It makes my shelf feel very full. I'm gonna start having to take advantage of my TBR shelf here. So that's it for now. I would highly, highly recommend picking up this book. It's an incredible story. And stay tuned because next week I'm interviewing the author R.D. Pyers as my first book market interview. If you haven't already and you've made it this far in the video, be sure to join the Indie Fantasy Club, this community of indie fantasy authors, indie fantasy readers. Check out some of my other book reviews, and I will see you in the next video.